All right, good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started here at the top of the hour. This is going to be episode 105 of Tech Thursdays. So I can't believe we've been doing this that long now, that there's that many episodes. So as the title of the stream implies, we're going to be doing something a little bit different this Tech Thursdays. We're going to be dedicating the entire stream primarily to DDR5, as the title suggests. So I'm going to be answering all questions about DDR5. We're going to be talking specifically about the different types of DDR5 that exist. This is going to be anything from your typical desktop UDIMMs to the new CUDIMMs to RDIMMs in Threadripper, LPDDR5X, CAM2, whatever, all the things basically that are out there now as current generation technology and kind of like forward-looking technology when it comes to memory, because a lot of this stuff will probably carry over to DDR6 in the future, as well as newer platforms for desktop like Zen 6, for example, and whatever Intel's cooking up, because right now Intel is the only one that has the latest and greatest memory technology, that being CKD or CUDIMM, which we are going to talk about. So I actually have some CUDIMM here from G-Skill. So just kind of, I'm doing a little bit something different here. We're going to actually try using the second camera here on the desk to kind of show. So this is the CUDIMM from G-Skill, DDR5 CUDIMM with the clock driver, Trident Z5CK, exclusively for Intel Z890. So what that means is that if you want to try out CUDIMM, if you want to be on the bleeding edge, there is only one platform in town right now on desktop that supports that, and that is going to be the Intel Core Ultra 200 series, also known as Arrow Lake. So we're going to be shifting focus to Arrow Lake in the near future here. In fact, I was supposed to get a video made, but I had 2 kits of these. So I had a total of 4 sticks of CKD, and it turns out the second kit was defective, so I had to actually send that back. So I'm waiting for the replacement, because we are going to try 4 sticks of CKD on Intel to see how 4 sticks on Intel works, because I filmed part of that video. Maybe I'll upload some of that as kind of like a, I don't know, like a behind the scenes thing or something. But the short story is it didn't work. Like, it took like 30 minutes to do memory training, and I kind of gave up after like 30 minutes because I was like, something doesn't seem right here. So I turned it off. I cleared the CMOS. I took 2 of the sticks out. I tested with only 1 of these, and it worked. And then I tried the second kit, and the second kit was running errors in memtest literally within 10 seconds of starting the test. So that kind of ruled it to be defective RAM. Because this kit works fine, I was able to boot these 2 sticks on the Z890 Maximus Hero with the Intel Core Ultra CPU, and I could run the XMP. So this particular kit is rated for DDR5 8200 megatransfers using the CUDIMM, so basically the clock driver, in single PLL mode. We'll talk about single PLL versus dual PLL versus bypass mode. There's a lot of terminology. This stream is going to be an extremely technical stream. So if you've been waiting for the paint time to go back to the way it was last year, because I know we were doing like really long sessions of paint time last year, particularly for motherboards, today it's going to be all about DDR5. So there'll be a lot of paint sessions in this one. Very technical discussion, all about DDR5. So regardless of whether you're going to be using CUDIMM or regular UDIMM, this is probably going to be a very educational stream, we'll say, for those of you that are looking to overclock your DDR5 or just get into upgrading to DDR5. So I also have some irregular UDIMM here. This is what I call the magic memory. So this is the DDR5-8000 kit that I've been using now for about, I think a little more than a year at this point, and it works flawlessly. In fact, I have two actual kits of the exact same memory. So I have a silver version here, and then I have the black traditional version here. This is the Intel XMP 8000, so DDR5 8000, 48 gigabyte capacity on each kit here. But this is kind of like my frame of reference going into overclocking DDR5, because CUDIMM or CUDIMM starts at 8200 and goes up from there. So this is kind of like an entry-level CUDIMM. They can go a lot higher than 8200, but what I'll say is my goal was not to run 2 sticks at 8200. It was to try to like run 4 sticks at the highest speed possible. And unfortunately, one of those kits was defective, so I had to send that back, and we're sourcing a replacement here. So this video has been delayed. But I thought, at least for the stream, for Tech Thursdays, we'll talk about DDR5. So, that being said, how's everybody doing? I guess I didn't even bother to ask people how they were doing. 4 sticks of CUDIMM 8400. So, I wasn't able to get 4 sticks to work, but again, I had a defective kit, so maybe the replacement will perform better. But for those wondering, CKD, let me do a little bit of an unboxing here with this memory kit. Now, this is a very premium package. The last time we unboxed premium G.Skill RAM, it was in 2023 with the G.Skill Zeta R5 Neo. So this is their AMD EXPO RDIMM. So this is registered DDR5. Registered DIMMs are basically server RAM, and this stuff is meant for Threadripper. So if you guys tuned in, those of you who've been watching my streams for a while now, you guys know that we built a Threadripper system back in 2023, back in November of that year. So I've had that system for over a year now, and it has been rocking 128 gigabytes of RDIMM server memory at DDR5 6400. So that is what this memory was, or is. But anyway, the CKD has similar packaging, so it comes in this really nice fancy box. It's actually really hard to open. It's like really, really stuck closed. It's like a clamshell. Okay, so here it is. And then inside, it has, you know, the G.Skill sticker. And then it has this nice fancy, what is this, a micro cleaning cloth in a plastic bag that says Trident Z Royal, even though this isn't the Royal branded memory. And then inside you have the piano black finish, and this is extremely reflective, as you guys could see from the stream preview. But look at that, that is reflective. That is so piano black, you can see the camera reflecting back on the heat spreader. But boy, is this thing a fingerprint magnet. Just touching this fingerprints, it looks so dirty. It's basically reminiscent of the PSP 2000, the PSP 3000, and the PSP Go. But yeah, we're going to be taking a look at CUDIMM. I've been wanting to test CUDIMM. I've kind of done a lot of DDR5 content. There's a lot of videos on the channel, if you haven't noticed already. But I thought we would look at CUDIMM because that's the only DDR5 that I have yet to cover. So yeah, you can see the ray traced reflection on it. Yep, that's right. Real-time ray tracing right there. So we are going to test this in the Intel platform, assuming I can get the 4 sticks to work. We'll also test it in the AMD platform. So for those of you that are wondering about like AMD, so AMD, the CKD does not work with the AMD memory controller currently. So I believe the only way for it to work, now the kit will work, it just will work like regular UDIMM. The clock driver on the PCB of the RAM will basically be passive. It won't do anything. It'll run in something called bypass mode. And what that means is it'll just function like regular UDIMM memory at that point. Now, I've heard that this only works if you have, meaning bypass mode will only work if you have either a Ryzen 9000 series CPU, so like this, for instance, the 9950X3D, or any of the Ryzen 9000 CPUs, it'll work in bypass mode. Now, if you have an older AMD CPU, like for instance a 7950X3D or any of the Zen 4 CPUs, I assume it should work in bypass, but I've been told that it doesn't work. So if you have a 7000 series Ryzen CPU, do not buy CUDIMMs because it most likely won't work. It just might not even post. That's my understanding. The Zen 5 CPUs have enough microcode in them to actually run the CUDIMM in bypass mode, whereas I think Zen 4 does not work with them. And likewise, if you have the older Intel Raptor Lake CPUs, so that would be the 13 and 14th gen Intel CPUs, do not buy CUDIMMs. You will waste your money. It will not even boot up. So this cannot work with anything on Intel except for the Arrow Lake CPUs. So do not try to install CUDIMM in a Z790 or older motherboard. It will not work. It just will not post at all. So you'll waste money, essentially. You just have to return it. Now, that being said, so the only platforms that this will work with is Zen 5 in bypass mode until AMD, assuming AMD even bothers to do this, programs the microcode to actually talk to the clock driver. And we'll talk about the technical aspects of how that works on this stream. And then Intel, of course, Arrow Lake is the only platform currently that has official support. So if you have an Intel Z890 motherboard and you have either a 265K or a 285K or 265K, whatever, the 245K, the Ultra 5, those will support this memory, and they will actually work with single PLL or dual PLL modes. We have not tested 4 sticks successfully yet because I have to get a second kit that works, but I can tell you that the 2 sticks, so 48 gigabytes total, so 2 times 24 at 8200, works flawlessly on my Z890 Maximus Hero. So it's basically plug and play, and it just straight up works. I did memtest 86, it did a full pass, 90-minute test, not a single error. Now, the other memory kit, there was literally a ton of errors within 10 seconds, so that one I had to send back. But we will test 4 sticks in a video in the future. I may actually make a video with just the 2 sticks, just to get some content on this topic. But that is a look at CUDIMM. And of course, there's XMP regular UDIMM, as well as we also have over here, if I can find the box, yeah, here it is. So EXPO DDR5 as well. So this is either DDR5 6000 or 6400, as well as DDR5 8000. So there are EXPO kits that run UDIMM at 8000 now. We talked about this last year. So if you're someone who is wanting to run fast RAM and you have a fast motherboard, there are a lot of options now for both AMD and Intel. You can always just buy XMP high-speed RAM and run that with AMD. And likewise, you can buy AMD EXPO RAM and run it with Intel, and it works just fine. So I have tested all combinations, so I can say with confidence that both combinations work. 64 gigabyte kits cast latency C4 out now. Yeah, we won't be covering that because I'm not a huge fan of like lower latency, like lower cast latency RAM. I am more a fan of memory bandwidth. I have found that if I had to choose between low cast latency versus high frequency, I'll take high frequency any day of the week. As someone who has tested a lot of different memory kits, I mean, we got a lot of memory kits here. High frequency is better. High frequency is better in like the typical average application and or game benefits more from higher frequency than it does from the lower latency timings. So the lower latency timings are good, but they're I'm not a big fan of them just because I think those kits are more expensive than they need to be, and they aren't giving you the impressive memory bandwidth that you get with like higher frequency. So yeah, no, I'm a bigger fan of like DDR5 8000 plus at this point versus something like, you know, DDR5 6000 CL26. So they're very expensive. What's expensive? The CL26 kit? Oh, I can imagine. Yeah, I guess if you're on... So it's weird, you know? Like, I can't really... I tested 4 sticks on Intel, but, you know, I tested it a while back, and it wasn't working. I could get Intel to run at like 4800, and that was as high as I could get a 13900K to go with 4 sticks of RAM. With AMD, we have lots of videos showing how to get it to run a lot of memory at 6000. So I'm way more confident with like AMD's ability to do 4 sticks than Intel's ability to do 4 sticks. That's why I'm literally trying to source CUDIMM to see like how stable can you get Intel to run 4 sticks at higher speeds, like 6400 for instance, because so far it doesn't really work that well. And I thought Arrow Lake would help because it's the newest Intel architecture, so I would assume it has the best memory controller from Intel. And on top of that, it has support for the CKD, aka CUDIMM, which is supposed to help in a lot of ways. And so far, it has not really impressed me that much as soon as you go to 4 sticks. Now, 2 sticks, whatever. Like, 2 sticks is easy. 4 sticks, completely different ball game. Like, you aren't even playing the same sport if you're doing 4 sticks of RAM. It's like way, way different. But anyway, we're going to dive into a lot of the technicals on that. So, let me see here. What do we want to do here? I did have a couple of... Do we have any news articles here? No, not really. We had like one thing. I guess we'll talk about them at the end. We'll just do the RAM. We'll talk about like the gaming stuff at the end. So let's go to Paint. Okay. So DDR5. DDR5. So DDR5 has many JEDEC speeds now. I think JEDEC goes all the way up to like 8800 if I'm not mistaken. And there's a lot of different terminology. So you have, within the DDR5 family, you have RDIMM, which is registered DIMM. Can someone tell me what DIMM stands for? Dual Inline Memory Module. I guess I'll tell myself. Dual Inline Memory Module. Registered Dual Inline Memory Module. What is a UDIMM? What does UDIMM stand for? What does UDIMM stand for? This one you guys have to answer. I answered the first one. What does this stand for? We're just going to basically go through all the acronyms that are in the stream title. Unregistered. Unregistered dual inline memory module. What's another one? CUDIMM. What's CUDIMM? What's CUDIMM stand for? The one that's right here, the CUDIMM. Where's the little bracket thing? Oh, okay, here, this thing. The CUDIMM. No one knows. Clock unified. Clock unregistered. Dual inline memory module. So it's clock unregistered dual inline memory module. These are most of them. What is LP DDR? What's the LP? Unregistered? What? What? Low power. Okay, Met got that one. Low power DDR. First of all, what does DDR stand for? Low profile. What is the full acronym? Low power. What is the DDR? What does DDR stand for? Oh, please tell me you guys know what DDR stands for. Double data rate. Dual. I almost wrote dual data rate. Double data rate, which is technically not exactly wrong, but double data rate. So low power double data rate. This is typically found in laptops. So laptop RAM is typically LPDDR nowadays. You can find this in desktops, like mini PCs might have this stuff. Does anybody know what's... Here's one that I'm forgetting. SODIMM. SODIMM. What is SODIMM? Does anybody know what that is? What's SODIMM? This one's not in the title of the stream. Socket on board? Did you make that up? Or are you being serious? I can't tell. I can't tell with some of these replies. System on it. No. No. Small outline DIMM. Or dual inline memory module. Small outline dual. So think laptop RAM. If you've ever seen laptop RAM is smaller than desktop RAM. So it's small outline dual. I don't know why it says outline. That's kind of random. That word is, this is the hardest word to remember in the acronym, because it's like the word outline is like, it's the only word that's like, what? It's just out of nowhere. It's like outline. Okay. Apparently that's part of the acronym. SODIMM. RDIMM? Oh, that's one that we weren't supposed to talk about. What's RDIMM? RDRAM, guys. What's RDRAM? This is a exclusive technology, so I don't expect anybody to know this. This one is normally not supposed to be known unless you have dealt with this company that made this. This is like a vendor-specific thing. Which we'll talk about vendor-specific acronyms in a minute. RDRAM stands for Rambus Dynamic Random Access Memory. I did not expect anybody to get this one. That one, I wasn't even going to ask you guys. But that one was like, whoa, someone actually asked like a super advanced question, okay? Rambus Dynamic. This is a specific technology developed by a company called Rambus. Now, this was something that was meant for... I forget the original use case for it, actually. I think it's considered an industry standard, but I don't fully remember the details on it. It's from a long time ago, if I remember. It's like a way, way old technology or something. I don't know. Maybe it's recent. I don't remember, actually. Rambus. Pentium 4. Okay, so it was like... Man, okay, hearing this makes me think of like HD DVD versus Blu-ray. That's what this sounds like. Like, it's like some specific thing that's one of the companies made, and I don't think it's used anymore, to my knowledge. But anyway, that's another one. Okay, so that is like one that's making this chart look too big. Okay, so these are basically the types of different DDR5, or I guess like RAM in general, not necessarily DDR5. We could just say types of random access memory, aka RAM. Yeah, but there's also, so there's dual, and there's also like what is it? SD RAM. SD-RAM? Is that one? Is that right? The single one? What's the difference between the RAM and the VRAM? RAM is memory that is meant for the CPU, and video memory is meant for the graphics card. FPM, EDO, yeah, okay, now we're starting to get too far into the weeds of like the older stuff. Static RAM, yeah, SD RAM. We could keep filling this out, but I think that's going to deviate too far from the original topic, which is supposed to be focused on DDR5. But yeah, these are all good things, like these older ones like SRAM and like SD RAM. But I think that's kind of like out of scope for what I want to talk about here. So the main one that we're going to focus on is going to be UDIMM and CUDIMM. So these two here, the second one and the third one. We might talk a little bit about the newer form factors for mobile, like CAM2. CAM2 is technically a derivative of CUDIMM. And I think there's like another one that also has the clock as an optional component. I forget which acronym that one is because it's very new. But yeah, UDIMM, CUDIMM, this is going to be the topic of the stream tonight. What's your experience with Tai Chi? Do you recommend it? It's fine. It's good. I've used it. Especially if you want to run a lot of RAM. It's not the best for like fast RAM, but it's the best for like a lot of memory. Like 4 sticks. It's good. Okay. So let's do another set of acronyms here. So let's do the custom SPD, or like, okay, types of SPD profiles. Does everyone know what I'm talking about when I say that? Does everyone know what SPD is? That's another acronym that I just realized we haven't even defined. Types of serial presence detect profiles, also known as SPD profiles. That's another acronym. So to learn about RAM, to understand the memory, a lot of people overlook RAM when it comes to building a PC. They think only about the GPU. They think only about the CPU sometimes, but mostly the GPU. They sometimes think about the motherboard. They sometimes think about the power supply. They barely think about the cooling. Maybe they do. And they barely think about the RAM. You know, it's kind of like it's like a lower priority thing. But to truly understand RAM, because when you have a much stronger understanding of every single component in the computer, you can become the master troubleshooter when it comes to determining what is actually wrong with a computer when you have someone come to you and they have a problem with their computer or their game is crashing and they don't understand why. And the reality is they have an unstable overclock and they don't know what it is, and they think that it's a driver problem, but it's actually an unstable overclock problem, but they don't know that because they copied somebody on Reddit's overclock settings thinking that it would work, and it just so happens that they didn't win the Silicon Lottery. So when you understand very deeply the technical aspects of memory or anything really in the computer, like, you are a lot more well equipped at troubleshooting problems that might arise, not just with your own computer, but with someone else's computer. So, serial presence detect profiles. So the types. Does everybody know what I'm talking about when I mention this? The types. I'll give you a hint. JDEC. What's another? EXPO. XMP. AMP. A-XMP. AEMP. What's another one? I think that's all that I can think of. DOCP. Let's talk about all of these. So, JDEC. What is JDEC? Oh boy, I think I'm forgetting this one. This one I'm going to have to Google it. I don't know this one. I forgot. I finally forgot one. I can't remember what JDEC stands for, guys. Does anybody know what JDEC stands for? This one I don't know. Oh yeah, there's no way I was going to get this one. Joint Electron Device Engineering Group. Yeah, Council. I would have never gotten this one. This one would have stumped me on the exam. I would have failed this question 100%. Or I would have just, if it was multiple choice, I would have just guessed the one that sounded the most scientific. So, Joint Electron Device Engineering Council. Good luck memorizing that one. Okay, what does EXPO stand for? So for those wondering, JEDEC is what people refer to as the default spec, the stock profile, the low-end speed, the slow speed, the boring RAM, the basic green RAM with no RGB. Like, that's what people think when they hear JEDEC. So JEDEC is responsible for the standard timing set of specifications for the memory technology. So okay, so somebody was explaining that one. Extended profiles for overclocking. So extended profiles for overclocking. That's EXPO. This is made by AMD for DDR5. For DDR5. Meaning this is only DDR5 exclusive. You will never find DDR4 or anything older with EXPO. It is only DDR5. Okay, what's this one stand for? XMP. This one's been around for a while. This one's like an old friend. XMP. XMP. Extreme Memory Profile. Or Profiles. Extreme Memory Profiles. This one is an Intel specific SPD profile type, meaning it was made by Intel. EXPO was made by AMD for DDR5. XMP was made by Intel. I believe it was made starting with from DDR2, but I'm not 100% sure if it was DDR2, but it was definitely around in the DDR3 days. That I know for a fact. What I do not remember is if XMP was in DDR1 or DDR2 days. I know it was 100% in DDR3. So I can say, from my point of view, when I started building computers, I know XMP existed with DDR3. I don't know if it existed with DDR2 or anything older. Maybe someone who has been building computers longer than me might know the answer to that question. But I have, in my own memory collection, Intel Extreme Masters XMP DDR2 or DDR3 1600 megatransfers for my i7 4770K. So I have 4 sticks, because you know me, I always do 4 sticks. It's always, I've been running 4 sticks since DDR3. So it's always 4 sticks. Always 4 DIMMs. Okay, so is AMD back in the DDR1? Honestly, I don't remember. Yeah, I was AMD back in the DDR1 days too, and I don't remember XMP being around. So, okay, next one, AMP, AMP. What's this one, guys? Bonus points for whoever knows this one. This is the coolest one. I don't even know why this one isn't even around anymore. This one is sick. This one is the coolest one. AMP. It has a cool name. It's literally AMP. What is this one? Oh, Johnny got it. Wow, I am impressed. I am impressed. AMD. Memory Profile. Or Profiles. This one was developed by AMD for DDR3. This is the RAM that was meant to go with the FX 8150 and FX 8350. So this was the RAM. I have I have AMP memory, DDR3 1866 CL9, running for an 8350 back in 2012. So yeah, this is the good stuff. DDR3 era. This was the rival to XMP in the era of DDR3. 1866. This was the good stuff. Think about that. AMP was typically 1860. It was DDR3 1866 CL9. CL9. Low latency. Or DDR3 2133 CL11. Those were the good old days. I have this. I remember seeing this. I don't think I have this one, but I definitely have this. All right, what's this next one? A-XMP. A-XMP. Put this one down here. We'll put this one over here. What is A-XMP? Nobody knows. Okay, so this one is another proprietary one. This is kind of like Rambus. This one is AMD Extreme Memory Profile. This one is MSI for AMD DDR4. So I didn't expect a lot of people to know this. The only people that would know this are people who have or had an MSI motherboard for an AMD Ryzen CPU, whether that be well, it's probably DDR4, because I don't know, personally, I don't know if A-XMP is still around. I highly doubt it. I don't think, maybe it's still around, but I don't think it is. I think A-XMP was for DDR4 from MSI for AMD. For, we'll just say Ryzen. That way it clarifies it. No, I know you said the answer. But this is MSI specific. So you will only ever see A-XMP on an MSI motherboard, meaning you will never ever see this on an ASRock, Gigabyte, or Asus motherboard. You will only see this on an MSI motherboard that is DDR4 and it is a Ryzen-based platform. You will never see this on an Intel motherboard from MSI. You will only see XMP on an Intel motherboard from MSI. Or EXPO if you're on a DDR5 and you install an EXPO-rated memory kit in an Intel-based motherboard. So this one was designed by MSI for Ryzen. So this one, DOCP. DOCP. Who knows what this one is? Direct overclocking profile. Who made this? This is another vendor specific. This is another vendor specific. A-XMP is MSI exclusive. Who made DOCP? Also written like this. Asus. Asus. For AMD since DDR3. Okay. This is Asus for AMD since DDR3. So now we're getting into very specific ones. These are vendors. You will only ever see DOCP if you are on an Asus motherboard that is meant for an AMD CPU. You will never ever see DOCP if you are on an Intel-based motherboard or another vendor that's not Asus. It has to be Asus, and the CPU has to be an AMD CPU. That is the only time you'll ever see DOCP. And then finally, this one, AEMP. What is this? This is the newest one. AEMP. ASUS Enhanced Memory Profile. Now this one is a dead giveaway who made this. This is 100% dead giveaway who made this. So, but basically, here is something that the reason why I wanted to go over this for you guys is because this is to help you become better at troubleshooting computers for your friends or family members or random people that you know in Discord, for example. So, what this means is the point of understanding this, or the advantage of understanding these things, is if someone comes to you and they tell you they have DOCP in the BIOS. If someone tells me they have DOCP in the BIOS, they loaded the DOCP, that immediately means to me, the way I translate that in my mind, like a reasoning AI, I immediately know that this is an AMD-based CPU. Why? Because DOCP is only on an AMD platform. You will never see this on an Intel platform. So that automatically means that they're not on Intel, that they have some kind of AMD motherboard, and it also means that they have an ASUS motherboard. Because it's DOCP, which is an ASUS proprietary technology. See? So this is the advantage of understanding the acronyms, understanding like the terminology. It gives you more capability in being able to help troubleshoot a problem. Like if someone says they bought RAM, they're trying to load the XMP profile, that the memory says it's XMP RAM, and they tell you they see an option for DOCP. DOCP is basically ASUS's translation layer for taking XMP RAM, translating it for an AMD CPU. That is the purpose of DOCP. So anytime someone tells me they have DOCP in the BIOS, I immediately know they have XMP RAM and they're on an ASUS motherboard and they have an AMD CPU. I immediately know just from what they told me that that is what they have. They don't need to tell me any other details. I already know what exactly they have. I don't know the exact motherboard model. I just know that it's an ASUS motherboard. And I know that they do not have EXPO RAM because they say they have DOCP, which means they have Intel XMP RAM, which does work fine on an AMD CPU. And likewise, EXPO works fine on an Intel motherboard. It works both ways. When you take XMP RAM and install it on an AMD motherboard, it will work. Likewise, you take EXPO RAM and install it on an Intel motherboard, it will work totally fine. So this is the advantage of understanding the technology on a deeper level. It makes you far more competent when it comes to diagnosing or even just like helping recommend PC hardware for someone who's looking to build a computer, or they may need help building a computer, or they may need help troubleshooting a computer problem. This is the advantage of understanding the acronyms and the technology. So the last one here, just to mention ASUS Enhanced Memory Profile. I saw the comment at the beginning of the stream. Someone was saying like the 256 gigabytes. So ASUS developed an enhanced memory profile for the super high dense capacity DIMMs. So we're talking like a 64 gigabyte stick of memory. So if you have 2 of those, you have 128 gigs of RAM. And if you have 4 of those, you have 256 gigabytes of RAM. So that's the main one thing I wanted to say about ASUS. We'll talk a little bit about AEMP in a little bit here, because this is for like the people who need like a whole bunch of RAM. This is basically made for that. So why is there EXPO and AMP if they work for both? Okay, AMP, first of all, doesn't exist anymore. As I said here, AMP stands for, well, AMP was a technology, it was an SPD profile made by AMD for DDR3. AMP did not exist in the DDR4 or DDR5 world. Technically, EXPO is AMP 2.0 in my mind. XMP is an Intel specific thing. So it means that you have somebody at Intel, you have a person here. This is an Intel person. So you got Intel, you have an Intel, this is an Intel. This is an Intel engineer. You have an Intel engineer. He was tasked with, him and his team made XMP. They invented XMP. You meant to put XMP, not AMP, in the original. Wait, what? Okay, yeah, now I understand. So, Intel invented XMP. Somebody at Intel, a team of engineers at Intel, literally invented XMP. Meaning, AMD has nothing to do with the development of XMP. Intel engineers wrote the XMP spec and profiles. What does that mean? That means Intel engineers developed the VDD, the VDDQ, the VD, the, no, VCC, no, VCI, whatever the other basically all the stuff that you see in the BIOS that is specific for voltages, for impedance values, for bus signaling, all those things, the Intel people wrote that spec in a, like, as kind of like an appendix or an addendum is the word? Addendum to the JEDEC spec. So they took the JEDEC reference and they developed their own custom serial presence detect profile. Now, they never designed this to work with AMD. Why would someone put all their time and effort into developing something so that their competitor can benefit from it? That doesn't make any sense. That's not how the market works. That's not how capitalism works. That's not how businesses compete with each other. You don't design something so that your competitor can use it like as if it was theirs. You know, like that's not how it works. So this is an Intel thing. Now, what happened was MSI, well, okay, let's talk about DDR3. So in the DDR3 world, Intel had XMP. AMD did not. So what did AMD do? They designed, so an AMD engineer designed AEMP. Or I guess it's not just one engineer, it's like a team. AMP. They made AMP. So Intel had XMP, AMD had AMP. Now, the reality is that at the end of the day, you have all these companies. You have ASUS. You have ASUS. You have ASRock. You have MSI. You have Gigabyte. You have these people. You also have BioStar somewhere in the background. Okay? You got, and BioStar and A-Bit and, you know, all the other people. So you had all these companies, EVGA. All of them were like, okay, we have to certify this stuff. But it's like, okay, but we also make like AMD motherboards. So NVIDIA, if we go further back, used to make Enforce for, now this goes way, way back. I don't even know if XMP existed in this era, for AMD. So you had NVIDIA and AMD over here making the chipsets and the CPU. And then you had these guys stuck in the middle. And then Intel was making their chipset and their CPU and their memory standard that they came up with. So these guys were like, okay, hold on a second, wait a minute. These guys made a custom, basically all this is a custom SPD profile at the end of the day. So ASUS was like, okay, you know what? We're just gonna do our own thing. So they're like, you know what? You have XMP. So I am ASUS. I can't go further back. Okay, apparently there's a limit on how far back you can go in Paint. So ASUS was like, here, just delete all of this. ASUS was like, hey, this is ASUS. ASUS. ASUS was like, okay, give us this XMP RAM, install it in our ASUS motherboard. We will take it. We will do something, which is basically, they'll translate it. And what they created on the output was DOCP. DOCP. So, and this is for AMD, by the way. Like, this is an AMD motherboard that ASUS has. So for ASUS AMD motherboard, and someone installs XMP Intel memory that has an Intel custom SPD profile, and they load the profile, ASUS applies DOCP, direct overclocking profile translation of the XMP. So basically, DOCP is nothing more than a glorified, rebranded name of XMP that ASUS applied to Intel memory for an AMD CPU. That sounds extremely complicated. That is all it is. It's literally all it is. And they do this for simplicity, because if somebody buys XMP RAM, ASUS doesn't care if they want the customer to buy their motherboard regardless. So they developed DOCP as a way to like, okay, you can bring whatever RAM you have, and we're assuming XMP RAM here, but if you buy an ASUS motherboard, you can rest assured that even though you have XMP RAM, which is technically not designed for a non-Intel platform, it will still work. That is what ASUS did. That they were the first ones to develop this DOCP thing. However, AMD had their own AMP SPD profile for DDR3. Now, in the DDR4 world, so we know what happened in DDR4 world, AMD kind of like went into hiding. AMD was basically Yoda and Obi-Wan at the end of Revenge of the Sith. Into hiding I must go. Failed I have. So the bulldozer, the failed dozer, the pile driver, the excavator, the steamroller, all those Jedi construction equipment things went into hiding on Dagobah, on Tatooine, somewhere they went and hid for like 4 years. They went and found Lisa Sue. They trained with Jim Keller to refine their Jedi skills, and they came back after training in the hyperbolic time chamber for many, many years, and that was the introduction of what we know as, why is this the wrong color? Ryzen. Ryzen comes out in 2017. However, there was no DDR3 AMP profile because it was basically like gone when the Jedi Temple was destroyed on Coruscant. AMP was destroyed with it, so there was no more AMP profile. So throughout this era, throughout the entire DDR4 era, you had companies like ASUS utilize technology that they developed, like DOCP, for Ryzen. So you could take Intel XMP RAM, you could plug it into an ASUS motherboard, load DOCP, and it would just work as if it was on an Intel motherboard. Likewise, MSI developed A-XMP for Ryzen. So you could take XMP RAM, install it in an MSI motherboard for a Ryzen CPU, and it would work just as well as if it was on an Intel-based motherboard. So that's basically what this is. Like, that's basically what these are, guys. Basically, what these things are, these two specifically, are motherboard manufacturers' attempt at allowing XMP memory to work on an AMD motherboard without any issues. That's what DOCP, which is Asus, is for, and that's what A-XMP from MSI is for. Now, we have not talked about ASRock and Gigabyte, and ASRock and Gigabyte, it's very simple. ASRock and Gigabyte, basically, they told Intel, you know what? Who cares? We're just going to make it work on AMD motherboards, and we're not even going to bother to name the thing a thing. Like, we're just going to call it what it is. So if you have a Gigabyte motherboard or an ASRock motherboard and you load XMP memory, or you install XMP memory on a Ryzen-based platform, guess what? Gigabyte lets you just straight up load the XMP profile on the Ryzen CPU, and they don't care. And ASRock, just like Gigabyte, literally doesn't care. It's like, oh, this Intel engineer developed this thing? Okay, thanks. We're just going to let it run on the Ryzen, on the competitor's thing anyway. Like, literally no one cares. So that's basically ASRock and Gigabyte's approach. They're like, you know, whatever. We're not going to bother to come up with some fancy name like DOCP or A-XMP. Like, who cares? No one cares. Call it what it is. It's XMP on an AMD motherboard. I don't care. That's their approach. Now, likewise, because of that attitude, now you have EXPO, which is basically AMD developed SPD profiles, and it works both ways. So it's like, you know, Gigabyte is like, EXPO RAM? You have, oh, you got one of these? And you bought EXPO RAM? Okay, who cares? You can load EXPO on your Intel motherboard because we literally could care less. So that's what's happened now. So now, literally, in 2025, no one really cares. So you can load EXPO RAM on an Intel motherboard. You can load XMP RAM on an AMD motherboard. So what we're talking about here is more of like a historical context of why these custom SPD profiles exist, why there's so many different names. So hopefully that kind of sheds some light on where these things came from and what their purpose was. Because in 2025, their purpose has become diminished, we'll say, like, especially now that AMD came up with EXPO. So there's basically EXPO and there's XMP. No one really cares. You can buy EXPO and put it on Intel. You can buy XMP, you can put it on AMD. They both work fine. As someone who has tested both of them in the reverse order, I'm speaking 100% from experience. I can tell you I can run EXPO RAM with my 13900K and it works totally fine. And I've been running Intel XMP RAM on Ryzen for literally more than half a decade, and that has always worked fine. So the reason why I wanted to make this segment on the stream is because I've gotten a whole bunch of weird questions like, oh, can I use XMP on a Ryzen, like on an X870 motherboard? And it's like, I tire of seeing those questions because it's the person asking the question, I can tell, is new to building a PC, which is totally fine. But when I see that question so many times in multiple videos, there's always at least somebody, every now and then there's someone asking, can I use XMP on a Ryzen motherboard? I never hear anyone ask about EXPO though, like using EXPO on an Intel motherboard. But I always get the question, can you use XMP on AMD? And it's like, every time I read that, I'm like, okay, this person is either really young or they've never built a PC before, or they never dealt with DDR4 with AMD. Because when you had DDR4, Like if you had a 5800X3D, for example, you were using XMP RAM. Like you were literally using XMP RAM with an AMD platform. So absolutely you can use XMP RAM on a AMD based motherboard. But the opposite is also true, and that's the question that no one ever asks. But I wanted to clarify that here. So you can, in fact, use EXPO AMD memory meant for Ryzen. You can 100% use that with an Intel CPU, and it will work totally fine. I have tested this myself. I literally ran the free EXPO memory from Micro Center with my 13900K for like a year and a half, and I never had any problems. So it's 100% doable. Funny how Intel XMP requires less voltage than AMD. Does it? Not really. In what way does it require? No, it's not actually true at all. They're the same standard. Is that always true that while enabling XMP, we need to set the speed a bit less from the limit to the RAM to get? That is also, I don't know where you read that, but that is 100% wrong, first of all. So that is wrong. You run it at the profile. You basically load XMP and you don't do anything else. That's that simple. I think the fault is at memory manufacturers here. So you mean Micron? Well, okay. When you say memory manufacturers, who are we referring to? Are you referring to like Corsair, G-Skill, Team Group, or are you referring to Samsung, SK Hynix, or Micron? Basically, are you referring to the manufacturer or are you referring to the reseller of the memory? They rebrand their RAM. Corsair, G-Skill. Okay, you're referring to those guys. Well, I mean, those guys, I don't know how you can blame them, though. Like, I don't know what they did wrong. Or, why are they at fault, though? You have to expand on that idea, because I don't see how those guys are wrong here. RAM got more than one slot for profile and more than oh, you mean they don't give you enough SPD profiles intended for Intel platform? Oh, but you can use, yeah, I know, that's misleading. Although it's not super misleading, because technically I understand where they're coming from, because you have to remember at the end of the day, like AMD developed EXPO, Intel developed XMP. Intel developed XMP, AMD developed EXPO, JEDEC is the standards body, like that's the default one. So it's like these are basically the three that matter at the end of the day. AMP is legacy, that doesn't exist. A-XMP doesn't really exist on DDR5 to my knowledge. Maybe it still does. And then DOCP still exists if you install XMP on an ASUS motherboard. An Asus AMD motherboard, I should say. But, for these things are more like historical things in my mind. They still exist. This one doesn't exist, but EXPO and XMP, they're basically the same thing. The main difference between EXPO and XMP is, what I will say, there is one difference. And this is a pretty significant difference. The main difference is EXPO is supposed to be according to AMD, EXPO is an open standard. So if you buy an EXPO kit of RAM, you are entitled to the full readout of all the primary, secondary, tertiary timings from the EXPO profile. Now, whether or not you get that info, that's going to be from Corsair or G-Skill or Team Group or whoever to, follow up on that. XMP is not really an open standard, although the fact that everybody just kind of made it an open standard with these weird things like DOCP, it's hilarious. But XMP, they're not entitled to do that. So if you buy XMP RAM, technically, let's say you buy Corsair Vengeance or Corsair Dominator, XMP, whatever, they're not obligated to provide you the full table with all the timing values. So they don't have to do that. That is one thing that's different about EXPO and XMP. XMP, they're not entitled to give you the full table. So you're kind of guessing, especially if you haven't purchased the RAM. But if you have EXPO RAM, they're supposed to be entitled to give you, or you're supposed to be entitled to receive the full table readout if you want that. Meaning, if you don't have that, like if you buy RAM and it doesn't give you the full readout, you can open a case with whoever you bought the, like if it's Corsair, we'll just use Corsair as an example. You can email Corsair. It's like, hey, I bought this EXPO kit. Can you send me the documentation for the actual profile, the EXPO profile? And they will do that. They're supposed to do that at least. So that is something that is different when we compare EXPO and XMP. So just something to be aware of. That's why personally I prefer only really to buy EXPO RAM, because if I want the full table, I know I can get it. And I can use it on Intel, I can use it on AMD. It's always worked for both. So, and it's a newer standard, and I guess that's one of the things, like, okay, it's supposed to be open, so I can get my full table, so I know exactly what the default TREFI is, I can know exactly what the TRC, all those, the TFA, the TRD, TRW, like, all those values you can get from the manufacturer. So Corsair, G-Skill, whoever you bought the RAM from, if it's an EXPO profile. Now, you can try doing that if you have XMP, but they don't have to give you that. They might be nice, and they might give you the full table, assuming they even have it, or they won't. It just kind of depends. So it's kind of a gamble with the older standard. Okay, so that is kind of the acronyms. So now let's discuss let's discuss the memory, how it works in depth here. So let's go with that. So let me clean all this stuff off. Do we need all this stuff? I don't know. I don't think we need any of this stuff anymore. So let's delete all of this. Okay, so DDR5. The DDR5. How it works. You have a stick of memory. And let's say down here, let's say we're looking at it from, the motherboard is like horizontal on its side. So here's a CPU. Here's one of the memory sticks. Just for simplicity, we're going to only draw one. And then you have the memory modules. To keep this simple, we're going to only use a single-sided DIMM. So just think of this as a single rank DIMM. This is a 24 gigabyte DIMM. So we'll just put the memory chips. I guess I should have put them closer together, but oh well. Yeah, they should have been closer together. Anyway. The point is, you have these memory sticks, or these memory modules, these DRAM chips on the memory stick, the DIMM, and then you have the CPU, and then you have the various different signaling and bus types. So the RAM functions with two layers. You have something called the CAD bus. The CAD bus. Does anybody know what that is? Or does anyone know what that stands for? CAD bus? What's a CAD bus? So you have the CAD bus, but we have here, actually, no, let's not put that there. Let's just draw the lines first. So you have the CAD bus from the CPU to and from the RAM. And this is going to supply a clock signal to each memory module. Maybe I should use a different color for this. So we'll use green. Yeah, we'll use green just to make it easier to see. So you have This supplies the clock signal for all of the DRAM chips. This is kind of what I like to refer to as the control of the memory. So this is going to be your clock, your synchronization. It is basically the upper level of the memory control. So it is actually the, well, I don't want to turn this into like a layer 3 versus layer 2 topic, because that's going to start overlapping with the network world, but you can kind of think of it that way. You can kind of think of it as the administrative layer for the DRAM modules. Not administrator in the sense that it's not the user, but it is the commands from the memory controller are issued to the DRAM chips over this interface. So this interface is known as the command address bus, or CA bus. We'll use colors. The CAD bus in green. So this is going to be the commands from the memory controller to instruct are sent across this interface, this wire trace. Now, the other layer, we'll use blue, I guess, just a different color, is going to be the data bus. The data bus is, how should I draw this? Should I draw this with straight lines? I'll just draw this with like a paintbrush, so it's quicker. So you have this. And this is bidirectional, so it's not like, you know, from the CPU only to the memory. It has to be able to return the data. I guess I should not have wrote CAD bus there, because that's going to make it more messy. But, you know, just to illustrate it, you have one to all. So I guess we can draw it like this. The blue one is called the data bus. So this is going to be the actual data that's in the memory address location, in the column or row, if you're talking about a matrice, in how it would be organized, in kind of like a spreadsheet, if you were to visualize the actual data in memory. The actual data, so the actual essence of what is coming from the CPU going into the memory, what's being written, what's being read, all of that data, that flows over the blue traces, and that is known as the data bus. The data bus. So your signaling for the CAD bus and the data bus is very important, because if it's not, you're going to run errors, and if you run errors, you're going to either risk data corruption, which would be the worst thing that could happen, or you would just have, you know, instability with the system. So you'd have like blue screen of death, you would have applications crashing, you'd have games crashing, like Cinebench wouldn't work properly, like basically benchmarks would not give you good results, they would just not work. So that is essentially how the memory subsystem works when talking to the CPU, which I've completely forgot to label. But this is the CPU. And this is the DRAM. Now, what happens when... Okay, I guess before we introduce the idea of the CUDIMM, we need to discuss the... like, what this looks like. If you were to look at the oscilloscope, or if you were to look at what's known as the eye diagram. So what we're actually talking about here, for those that have no idea what we're discussing at this point, we are talking about engineering concepts here. These are electrical engineering based ideas, or not ideas. It's actually the underlying physics of how the electronic device and circuitry functions for the memory and the CPU to work the way they're supposed to. So when you look at the CAD bus and you look at the clock signaling, what ends up happening is you have something known as the eye diagram. So if we're saying we have, let's just say we are running DDR5, let's do two different comparisons. DDR5 6000 versus DDR5 8000. So DDR5 6000 will have a very clear eye diagram, which means your sinusoidal behavior is going to be very clear and clearly defined in terms of the peaks and the troughs. So when you look at this from an eye diagram perspective, you would clearly be able to see that your 1 and your 0 are clearly defined. You know, they might be, okay, I don't want this to be out of phase, so we're going to try to draw this, you know, the way it's supposed to look, which would be kind of like, oh, I'm not doing a very good job here. But essentially, you would get this eye shape. So you'd have the up and the close, and then you'd have the open again, and then you'd have the close and the open. So I guess I should have drawn these a little bit more spaced. But effectively, what you'll have is something that looks almost like, I don't know, like a DNA strand. So you'll have a clearly defined area where the data is, the voltage is high versus low. And this can be represented as a 1 or a 0. So, because remember, data is fundamentally going to be binary because we're talking about a digital circuit. So the digital circuit is either on or off, and it's switching very quickly. And the faster your DDR5 speed, the faster the switching is taking place. So if we now look at DDR5 8000, DDR5 8000 will look messier than DDR5 6000. And I didn't do a good job drawing the DDR5 6000, but DDR5 8000 will be more like if we have the same sinusoidal structure, but now we have it, let's just draw in a different color. Let's use purple, or let's use a lighter color. Let's use, I don't know, red. So in this one, it's going to look more skewed. So you're going to have essentially clock skew. So you'll have it more like messy. So the shape won't be as straight or as clearly defined. It'll have more like waves in it. It won't look as like straight. The higher the memory speed, the more this, we'll call it jitter and noise, electrical interference, starts being introduced when you run the memory at higher speeds. You know what also affects the stability and the shape of this eye diagram? Temperature. The hotter the memory is running, the more noise and the more jitter is added to the system because of the thermal effects on the electronic device. Because when it is running at a hotter temperature or a higher temperature, you get more vibration, you get more micro vibrations of the electrons because they are running at a higher temperature. So they have to like, basically they're moving more in a irregular pattern. They're basically vibrating more to, and where am I going with this? The point is, the hotter the memory, the more likely it is to become unstable and generate errors because of this micro effect of what's happening to the electrons, because the higher temperature is causing them to be more agitated, I guess. It gets into the physics of how electrons behave at higher temperatures. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So if you're running higher speed, it can become more noisy. And if you're running higher temperatures, it can become more noisy. So how do we prevent instability while also trying to maintain higher memory speeds? Well, one of the things would be colder temperatures. So active cooling on the memory, for example, is a very easy way to stabilize the system, because if the memory is running really hot, you could end up with instability. The other thing too is lower voltage. Simply running lower voltages, meaning better binned memory that can achieve higher switching frequencies at lower power, meaning lower voltage, also means that you get a more stable system. Hey Sean, thanks for the sub. So there's a couple of things here. One is lower voltage, another is lower temperature, and those two typically go hand in hand. Lower voltage typically equates to lower operating temperature. But lower speed also can help stabilize the system, because if it's not switching as fast, it's less likely to run into errors, because the more quicker it's moving, the more likely an error could make the system unstable. So hopefully this makes sense in terms of like how or why systems, or why higher speed DDR5 is harder to achieve stability with, just because of the bare physics of how it works. Does that make sense? So the other thing you can do, one of the things that a lot of motherboard manufacturers have done, is they have improved the quality of the PCB components to improve the signal to noise ratio of the CAD bus and the data bus. So by running more pristine, shorter wires with more electrical noise isolation, so think more layers of PCB. So let's do like a cross-section comparison of let's say a 6-layer PCB, an 8-layer PCB, and a 10-layer PCB. So let's do 3 different motherboards. So let's look at the MSI Godlike, and then we will also compare the ASUS ROG Strix. Well, okay, let's do MSI Godlike, ASUS ROG Strix, and Gigabyte Eagle. Okay? We're going to do super high-end, stupidly expensive, kind of like really expensive still, but it is kind of like the upper echelon of what most people would even dare to spend on a motherboard. Then you have your budget-friendly Gigabyte Eagle. So let's draw cross sections of these to showcase how these motherboards make a difference in allowing something like DDR5-8000 to work. So in the case of the Gigabyte Eagle has 6 layers. I believe it's a 6-layer PCB. So 1, 2, 3, 4, whoops, 5. That's still a lot of layers. 6 layers is still a decent amount. 6. So this is a cross section of the Gigabyte Eagle. So here we have, we'll just draw in, oh, I should not have used yellow. Oh, well, let's just use this yellow then. Okay, so here comes the CAD bus. Oh, I should not have used green. Man, I already screwed up. So, okay, here comes the CAD bus. The CAD bus is coming through on layer 2. It's coming through the wire. This is a metal copper wire going through the PCB from the CPU to the RAM. Okay, now you have the data bus. The data bus is coming through, let's see, that's layer 2. So this is 1, this is the second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one, sixth one. Okay, so let's just say it's coming in on like layer 4. It's coming in like this. Okay? So you've got the CAD bus here. You got the CAD bus on layer 2 or whatever. And then you have the data bus on layer 4. Like up here somewhere. You see what I'm saying? That's basically what this is illustrating. This is a cross section of the motherboard. So if I was literally to like slice the motherboard with a katana, if I literally slice the Gigabyte Eagle in half, right between the CPU and the DIMM slots, if I take the katana or a lightsaber, like if I just grab this lightsaber here, like if we turn on this Mace Windu lightsaber and we just slice the, you know, the motherboard in half right across the CPU to the DIMM slots, you would see, under a microscope, you would see that the CAD bus is not too far from the data bus because the motherboard is a 6-layer PCB. There are 6 layers stacked on top of each other to form the motherboard. So these wires would have this behavior. Now, what about if we had an MSI, or no, what if we had a ASUS ROG-E Strix? This is an 8-layer PCB. So the 8-layer from ASUS has 2 more layers. 2 more layers. 8-layer PCB. So all that means is it's thicker. It's got 2 more. What does that mean? That means, now let's go put the data bus in. It means they can be further away from each other. It means your wire traces are further apart. They're more spread out. They're more spread out. There's more PCB material between them. So what does that mean when they're more spread out? There's potentially more material above and below them to isolate the wires from the outside world, from the surface of the motherboard. So if there's more layers between them, between the individual wires, it means the signal is clearer. It means that the trace layers are more isolated from each other, which means the signal to noise ratio can be better. Less noise, not necessarily less jitter, but it could turn into potentially less jitter. Jitter is going to be more of like a supply voltage thing. But less noise, meaning clearer signal, meaning better fidelity, and the memory will be more likely to run stable at a higher speed. Now let's go to the Godlike. The only difference between the Godlike and the Strix is even more layers. So the Godlike adds 2 more layers for a total of 10 layers. So it becomes the thickest motherboard out of all of them. It is super thick. It is a 10-layer PCB, which means the signal-to-noise ratio on the Godlike is even better than the Strix because you have even more noise isolation. You have more material between the individual wires as well as where the wires are and the outside air surface of the PCB. And this is the reason why the more expensive the motherboard, in general, the higher or the more likely it is able to drive higher DDR5 speeds. It's because it has better, lower noise, better isolation for the signals. As a result, you can do higher memory speeds. Okay, so any questions on that? I know we just did that was like a big deep dive explaining why. Just want to see if anybody is confused. Yeah, MSI fixed that. You're referring to the dashboard issue. That was fixed a long time ago, man. We are literally streaming on an MSI Godlike right now, and we have no problem. In fact, hold on, I can kind of probably move this camera. Maybe, I don't know, I have to like adjust the tripod. So, we've shown it before. The Godlike works fine. We're streaming on the Godlike right now. No problems, it works. It's perfect. Okay, so does CAM2 RAM make much higher speeds? CAM2 is CUDIMM based. It's CUDIMM based. So in order to run CUDIMM, or in order to run CAM2, you have to be able to support CUDIMM. You have to be able to support that clock generator. I have an SSD in M2_1 and it has never had any issue. So I don't know. That might be a specific brand of SSD. So my boot drive, I believe, is in that M.2 slot right now, and I've never had a problem with it. And remember, I have like a launch Godlike. It's one of the early ones from November of last year. So I don't know what people are saying. Mine works fine. Okay, so now we can talk about CUDIMM. Because we've explained why you can do higher speed with better isolation, with lower temperatures, and maintain stability. But now, what happens with CUDIMM? CUDIMM introduces a new component to the motherboard, or not the motherboard, to the DRAM itself. So with CUDIMM, you have a new component on the, I guess I'll put it like this. It's not that large. It's actually small, but in order for me to fit the letters CKD, the clock driver, it has a clock driver for the CUDIMM. So you introduce the CUDIMM or the clock driver, and now you have to have the CPU talk to it. And you know, CPUs are like, they're, I don't know, chatty or whatever. They like to talk sometimes. Sometimes they don't. I don't know. So here we have the CPU talking to the CKD. It talks to it. It tells it things that it really needs to know. It sends it stuff. It sends it the signaling, the clock speed of the memory controller to synchronize or divide. And then this provides that clock to every memory module. It spreads the word. It spreads the word. It basically takes the signal from the memory controller and it regenerates it and amplifies it. So you have the CPU. Let's say we have the CPU. You have the CPU memory controller, the IMC, the integrated memory controller. And then it basically sends the clock signal to the CKD. The CKD will clean it up. So basically, how do I want to draw this? I want to draw this in a different manner. So it sends a clock signal. It sends a clock signal that looks like this. Then the CKD is here. And the CKD will regenerate and amplify the clock signal. Like this. This is the output. So that's basically what it does. That way, the clock signaling is no longer the bottleneck for DDR5. It allows much higher speeds. However, the bottleneck becomes, or could potentially become, the CAD bus. So basically, all this stuff in the middle, once again, becomes the bottleneck. So the only way to improve this is with what we talked about earlier, the traditional methods for reducing the noise, better isolation for the electrical traces, better quality of the signal traces, potentially cleaner voltage, and other things like that. So CKD CUDIMM is not a magic silver bullet for DDR5. DDR5 still succumbs to the limitation of the noisy CAD bus potentially. This is especially true when you run 4 sticks of memory. 4 sticks of memory makes for an insanely high traffic, very confusing CAD bus for the memory controller. So I don't know if 4 sticks of CUDIMM is capable of running speeds that are above 6400, but we will try that. That is the whole purpose of the CUDIMMs that you see here. We are going to be making videos about 4 sticks of CUDIMM in the near future. Now, in order for this to work, in order for the CUDIMM to actually function, the driver, in this case the CPU's memory controller, has to provide a control word for the CKD to respond to interact and receive instruction on what to do. So typically what happens is you have, not only do you have the clock signal itself that then gets regenerated and repeated from the CKD, but you also have to have the overhead signal. So you basically have to have something called a control word. Think of it like almost like a passphrase that the CPU tells to the CKD, which will allow the CKD to function. If it does not hear the control word from the CPU, it will not activate. So, what happens when you install this in a Intel Z890 platform with a Core Ultra 9 285K? The Core Ultra 9 285K, it says, okay, you are a CKD. I am Intel. I will tell you the control word. You will do as I say. And the CKD is like, yes, okay, I am here. Okay, very good. Send the control word. Okay, here it is. It sends it. I don't know if it sends it on the I3C, I2C. I don't know what it sends it on. But basically, it sends the control word, and then it works. And then it starts doing what it does, which is basically what we just illustrated down here. It just does this. Now, what happens if you install this in a X870E with a Ryzen 9 9950 X3D. So in this scenario, the CKD is like, okay, tell me the control word, and the Ryzen CPU is like, no, I'm not going to tell you the control word. I want you to be quiet. I don't want to talk to you. And then the CKD is like, okay, fine. You are very rude. I will be quiet. So basically, it disables itself, and what ends up happening is you basically have the AMD CPU memory controller continue on with the timing as if nothing is there. This is known as bypass mode. Bypass mode. So why is it called bypass mode? Because AMD did not, or Ryzen did not tell it the control word. So the CKD is like, fine, I will not do anything. I will just send the signal transparently through me as if nothing ever happened, because you don't want to talk to me. So it's just going to go transparently through. So what that means is it does not get the retiming, nor does it get the regenerative effect of the CKD. So it effectively behaves as though it is a regular DDR5 run-of-the-mill unregistered DIMM running a CKD in bypass mode. So the Ryzen 9000 will not tell it the control word, because currently the BIOS or AMD or whoever has not enabled the control word language or protocol on the Ryzen memory controller for Zen 5 specifically. So that explains the scenario with a Zen 5 CPU. So now let's discuss what happens if you install this in an X870E with a Ryzen 9 7950X3D. So this is going to be more speculation on my part, but my assumption from what I have heard is that if you do this, if you install a CKD with a Zen 4 CPU, the CKD will try to boot up. It'll be like, hey, what is the control word? Tell me the control word. And the Ryzen 9 Zen 4 CPU will basically do a no reply. It will literally ghost the CKD. And the CKD will be like, hello? Are you there? Hello? Okay. Are we doing memory training? So they literally have no conversation. So what ends up happening is the system fails to post. It just doesn't work. So that's my understanding of what happens if you install a Zen 4 CPU with a CUDIMM. Now, I don't know if that's how it works. I'm assuming that's how it works. But let's say you have a Z790 with an i9 14900K. So let's say you dare to install a CKD with a i9 14900K. So in this scenario, the CKD turns on and it's like, hey, what is the control word? And the i9 is like, and it fails to post. So basically, these scenarios are kind of a public service announcement, because if someone's interested in buying CUDIMM, but they do not have the right platform, they're going to be very, very disappointed, or they're going to think that they bought something defective, when in fact, they just bought something that is incompatible with their current hardware. So hopefully this sheds light on what works and what doesn't, because this is known as the bleeding edge of technology. The CUDIMM is the latest and greatest memory technology for desktop computers today. So hopefully that answers that. Now, I assume going forward, all future desktop platforms from both AMD and Intel will fully support CUDIMM. Obviously, Intel supports it today with Arrow Lake, but I assume because Zen 5 currently can interact with the CUDIMM in bypass mode, that to me, it's kind of like a preview that, okay, that means that AMD will most likely support CUDIMM on the next CPU generation. No, it is not a base clock generator. No. It is a repeater. It does not generate its own clock. It basically takes the clock from the memory controller and it basically repeats that clock with amplification. So no, it is not a clock generator. That's a good question, though. So currently, the only platforms or the only CPUs that fully support this are Intel. So full support is going to be Intel Core 2, or not Core 2, Core Ultra 200 series. Partial support is going to be AMD Ryzen 9000 series. Now, I don't know about Ryzen 8000, like an 8700G, for example. I have no idea if that partially supports this. But today you have full support, and you have partial support, and then you have no support. No, not supported is going to be, 12, 13, 14th gen Intel, and then like all like Zen for AMD Ryzen's 7000. These do not support it at all. So meaning you cannot even get like, ooh, that's maybe you should turn this camera off because it's in the way. And I need space. So there. So the only ones that support CUDIMM today properly is going to be Intel Core Ultra 200. The Zen 5 partially supports it only in bypass mode, so you do not actually get the proper behavior, meaning the clock generator doesn't actually do anything, but at least you can use the memory with a Ryzen 9000 CPU. And then everything else that's older, it doesn't work at all. So we may do a video showing what happens if you install CKD DIMMs, because we got them right here from G-Skill. So I may do a video installing this in an old Intel platform, so basically 13th gen, and see what happens. I may install it in a Ryzen 7000 series and see what happens, just to prove that it literally doesn't work at all with those. And then we will definitely try installing it on the Ryzen 9000 just to see that it works in bypass mode. And I already know, because I've already tested it with Intel Core Ultra, and I know that it works with Intel Core Ultra. So that is going to cover that. So that is all about CUDIMM, for those that did not know about it. So any question? Oh, question about DDR5. It would be the same voltage. Why would you need to run a higher voltage if you're running a lower speed? The only time you would need a higher voltage at a lower speed is if you're trying to tighten the cast latency. Both Ryzen 8000 and 9000 working back. Okay, that's good. I was kind of thinking 8000 was that way. And the way you can tell is Tech Power Up actually has a really good article on this that they did. Let's go to that article. Okay. So they recently did kind of a look, and here actually is the what we were talking about earlier with the sideband bus. So that's like the clock signaling or the control word. So let's look at this one here. Do they have a good diagram? Okay, so here they have the CKD. You can see this is the DIMM, just like I drew it earlier, and then you have the CKD. And then here you have the input clocks from the memory controller. And then you have these output clocks from the clock driver. So basically, if it's running in bypass mode, all it does is it takes the clock from the memory controller and it just passes it through transparently, as though nothing's happening. If you run it in single PLL mode, it will take the one signal from the memory controller and generate 4 outputs, which are shown here. If you run it in dual PLL, or double PLL mode, which is another operating mode for CUDIMM, which we will talk about in the video showcasing CUDIMM in the future. It'll take 2 clock inputs from the memory controller, and it will generate 4 outputs from 2 inputs. So that's basically the different operating modes. And then, okay, here is a really good screenshot they took from, I assume this is from MSI's motherboard page. So right here, they give an example of this. I can tell is an AMD motherboard. So this is probably MSI. So it says, supports CUDIMM clock driver bypass mode only. That basically means that it's running on a Zen 5 CPU. And then this one supports CUDIMM. This one is a Intel Core Ultra series CPU. And what's funny, the dead giveaway is the fact that it says supports memory overclocking in Intel XMP 3.0. That is a dead giveaway. And then over here, supports overclocking with AMD EXPO. So that's a dead giveaway. This is an AMD motherboard. So, but they do, this is a really good article. So I definitely recommend reading the Tech Power Up article. They have some good questions and answers. It talks about how bypass mode works. So here's what I was talking about earlier, guys. So remember in the scenario while I was talking about the control word, this is what I'm talking about. There's a state machine that runs out of band from the actual clock inputs. And okay, this is a good example of what I meant when I said single PLL versus dual PLL. So in single PLL, you have one phase lock loop taking the single input signal from the clock, from the IMC's clock, and you generate 4 outputs for that memory channel. Likewise, if you have a dual PLL mode, you have 2 input clocks and you generate 4 outputs off of the 2 inputs, and that is the dual mode. But up here at the top where it says CKD control word state machine, this is the thing that the memory controller needs to talk to in order for the CUDIMM to actually do its thing. So in this scenario, if I have a Core Ultra 7 265K installed on a Z890 Maximus Hero motherboard, the Intel CPU will tell the control word to the CKD up here in the top part of this screen, and then it will activate and it will start doing the output function using the retiming of the signals. So you can see here it has these little amps. And then the other thing too is if you have an AMD Zen 5 CPU, it will not tell it to activate. It'll basically tell it the control word for off, so it will go to bypass mode. Now, it is worth mentioning, you can in fact run bypass mode on an Intel Core Ultra CPU. Why would you do this? Well, it turns out if you install 4 CUDIMMs for a 2 DPC setup on an Intel Core Ultra, the CUDIMMs do not work beyond 2 CUDIMMs, or I guess 1 CUDIMM per channel. So you cannot do 2 CUDIMMs or 2 CKDs. Meaning, what I have found in my experimentation recently with the CUDIMMs on Intel, when I use 2 sticks of RAM, it works as intended. When I use 4 sticks of RAM, it does not work as intended. It cannot train. I let it train for 35 minutes of memory training, and it eventually stalls out with the orange light. It never progresses past, I think, code 7F or something. It like gets stuck at like 7F or 18, and it never progresses. I let it sit for 35 minutes of memory training on Intel, and it refused to train. So what I did was I disabled the CKD control word, and I basically forced the CUDIMMs into bypass mode as though I was running it on an AMD system, and then it was able to work and train properly. But however, one of my memory kits was defective. It was running errors, so I have no idea if I don't know if it was going to work, or if the CKD itself was defective on one of the sticks or both of those sticks. I don't know. The only thing I can do is replace the memory kit with another one and see if that fixes the problem. So, but more to come on this subject, because we're kind of at a point now where we've already talked about graphics cards for like 2 months straight, or maybe even 3 months at this point. So there's nothing to talk about on the graphics card side. We've talked about motherboards. There's a couple of new motherboards from ASUS that are coming out. One literally just launched earlier this week, actually. That being the X870E Apex. So we might talk about that one again later. And then also there are rumors of the ASUS ROG X870E Crosshair Extreme. So we may be doing some deep dive block diagram discussion on that motherboard in the future. But in terms of content, it's all going to be DDR5, because like this is the only thing that's interesting to talk about right now. But you know, until more interesting things pop up, we'll be doing a lot of content on DDR5. So yeah, so this is kind of interesting. So here it tells you how does bypass mode work. The CKD is waiting for, like, okay, this is what I just described earlier when we were describing the scenario of installing this with a Zen 5 CPU. Control word. It's waiting for a control word. If the control word is not sent, the driver will fall back to bypass mode. The control word can be any one of the following: reserved one, read only, write only, read write, one-time programmable, or sticky, cleared by a power cycle not reset. So this means you have to turn the power off or hold the power button. You cannot like press the reset button. It will not send sticky on a reset. So will CUDIMM work on legacy Intel or the AMD platforms? And we just talked about this already, so we've already answered that question. Is there a latency penalty? Yes, there is. So because the clock signal has to pass through the CKD, because it has to go through this circuitry in the middle, there is slight latency that is added. So if you're running an Arrow Lake CPU, which already has very high latency, running CKD will increase the latency, but it is a very, very small amount. So it's really not that bad. And it opens up the ability to get much higher memory bandwidth at the sacrifice of latency, additional latency. So just something to be aware of. So there is a small minimal amount, but it's really not that bad. Meaning the benefit of the higher memory frequency outweighs the additional latency that you get from running a CKD. Wait, CUDIMMs need to train about 6 hours? Is that real? Is that for real? Because I tried mine and it was taking like 35 minutes. I gave up. I cleared CMOS, started it up without it. 6 hours? Are you serious? Man, I don't know. It was taking a long time, so I basically kind of gave up. And I just like, okay, bypass mode, turn this thing off, just bypass mode. Bypass mode worked. Bypass mode was basically the same as like AMD memory training. So 6 hour memory training, man. And people say AMD has long memory training. 6 hour memory training on an Intel Arrow Lake. The ASUS boards definitely take 6 hours. Are you serious? Are you serious? Are you guys lying, or are you just making that up, or is that real? Because I was sitting there for over half an hour, people. I was trying, guys, I was trying to make the video. I was filming, the camera was like, the battery was dying. The battery was dying, and I was like, oh man, is this thing gonna train or what? Like, what is going on here? And the thing is like, code 15, code 18, 7F, 35, 31, code 15, C1, 7F, 31, 35, 7F. It was doing that for like 30 minutes. I was going crazy. I was about to be like, okay, this is going to be the dumbest video because this thing is like memory training galore. Like, what is going on here? It's like, Intel, what are you doing? You're supposed to be the fast one. You're supposed to be the fast one. You're not supposed to take half an hour to do memory training. And I gave up and I cleared CMOS. I'm like, no. Bypass mode. Bypass mode. This thing's dumb. Turn it off. Waste of money. It's like, just bypass mode. At that point, it's no different from AMD at that point. Are you serious? 6 hours? 6 hours? What? 6 hours? 6 hours to do memory training? Are you serious? That's ridiculous. What? Hold on a second. Wait a minute. 6 hours? You're telling me it takes 6 hours to train memory on Intel? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. 6 hours to memory train on Intel, man. What? And I thought 30 minutes was too long. I don't know. I'm gonna have to do some research on that. I don't think that's correct. Something doesn't sound right about that. There's no way it's intended to take that long. That doesn't sound right. Now, okay, what I can tell you guys, like, I gave up because I ended up having defective memory. So I was like, yeah, something is definitely wrong. But I couldn't tell if it was actually because of the defective RAM or if it was, like, some other thing with the CPU itself. So I know for a fact that my Intel CPU, my Arrow Lake Intel, can do regular. So hold on, where's that camera? Hold up, where's that camera? Okay, this camera. Okay. So what I can tell you guys is this is, hold on, what is all this stuff? This is the magic memory. This is the magic Intel XMP RAM that is the DDR5. There's a link to it in the description of this video. It's the DDR5-8000 stuff. So this is my special 48 gigabyte DDR5-8000 memory kit that I've been using for all my high-speed memory videos and live streams for over a year. This stuff works flawlessly with AMD at 8000 on a Crosshair Hero and a MSI Godlike. No problem. Now, Intel Core Ultra LGA 1851. LGA 1851. There it is. The Intel Core Ultra 7 265K. This thing can do 8000. It can do 8000 just like AMD. Now, my 13900K had a garbage IMC. I originally purchased this for a 13900K. Guess what? It never worked with the 13900K. but it worked flawlessly with the AMD, and it works with the Arrow Lake, meaning Intel's Arrow Lake has a better memory controller than Raptor Lake. AMD always had a reliable memory controller because it is very, very buff. This thing has got muscles. You know why? Because you can literally run Gear 1, meaning 1-to-1, up to 60 or 6,000, 6,200, maybe 6,400 if you're lucky. That proves that this thing has a really buff, muscular, robust memory controller, because the Intel is a skinny twig. This thing cannot do 1-to-1 at all on DDR5. It can only do 1-to-2 or 1-to-4. This is true for all Intel DDR5 CPUs, all the way back to 12th gen Alder Lake. But the AMD is very strong with the memory controller. So you can reliably do, 8,000 with a good motherboard. You can reliably do 4 sticks at 6,000. We have many videos on the channel showing how to run 192 gigs, 128 gigs, a 96 gig single rank, all that good stuff. 4 sticks. You want 4 sticks DDR5? You go AMD. You want 4 sticks Intel? Well, enter CUDIMM. CUDIMM. Here it is. CUDIMM for Intel Z890 only. Get that garbage 13 and 14 gen out of my face. That stuff is utter trash in comparison. So, if you want 4 sticks on Intel, you gotta go with the latest and greatest. You cannot do 4 sticks on 13 900K or 14 900K or any of those older CPUs. You can do it, but you can only do it at 4,800 mega transfers. In fact, and I think we've got the, let me see if I actually saved the, I thought I had the memory stuff bookmarked somewhere. Processor SKU, is it this one? Okay, yeah, this one. Okay. Okay, so Intel, 13, 14, same thing, doesn't matter. Here we go. Intel supports for 2 DPC, 4 sticks of memory. Intel says if you're doing 4 single rank DIMMs, the maximum you can do is, oh, I'm sorry. I meant to be sharing that. I'm not sharing it. Get this out of the way completely. The maximum supported speed for 4 sticks on Intel 13th gen, and I have been unable to find this for Arrow Lake. So if someone out there can find this exact document for Intel's Arrow Lake, let me know the link, because I've been trying to search for that. I cannot find it at all. But I found the 13th and 14th one, Raptor Lake. Maximum supported speed for UDIMM is, for DDR5, is going to be 4,000. So if you want 4 sticks of single rank, which means you want a total of 64 gigs or 96 gigabytes. That's 4 times 24, which is what I'm personally running in like all of my AMD systems. The maximum speed on Intel is going to be 4,000. If you're running dual rank, so if you're doing 128 gigs or 192 gigs on Intel's 13 or 14 gen or 12 gen, maximum supported speed, 3,600 mega transfers. So because of this limitation, Linus switched over to AMD because his editors were tired of running DDR5 at 3600 megatransfers. In fact, they were on Threadripper running 4800. They recently went to the 9950X running, I think, that one 128 gig kit that he was doing, the 256 gigs RAM at like, I don't know, 5600 or whatever. So anyway, the point is, Intel requires way more work to get it to run at higher speeds. So this is where CUDIMM enters in to hopefully save the day, because Intel has struggled with trying to run higher speed memory, especially when you're doing 4 sticks. You cannot do high speed on Intel. It is garbage when trying to run high speed. You're at risk of corrupting your operating system. I have tried it. I'm speaking from experience. And this is the reason why AMD is just so much more robust when it comes to the memory controller. The memory controller is very muscular. It is like, I think of it like a super macho, muscular bodybuilder style memory controller, because the thing is, Intel cannot even do Gear 1, guys. Like, that right there is kind of like, it's so obvious. Like, you start in 1 to 2 on DDR5, like right out the gate on the Intel. On AMD, you're 1 to 1 up to 6000. Then you got to drop to match Intel in 1 to 2. But at 1 to 2, dude, I can run 8000 on AMD like all day long on like every single Ryzen CPU that I've ever tested. 1300K, I can't do it. I can't do 8000 on 1300K. And for some reason, I could never get Gear 4 to work. So yeah, I don't know. It's not really going to work. I just kind of gave up at that point. And that's the reason why we haven't done a lot of memory videos with Intel, because my 1300K it just had a terrible memory controller. Now, that all changes with Arrow Lake, because Arrow Lake, where's my camera? Arrow Lake, get this Ryzen out of here. What's this Ryzen doing here? Arrow Lake has CUDIMM. So the whole idea behind CUDIMM, we can combine it with Arrow Lake to get higher speeds with 4 DIMMs. My goal with Arrow Lake is to be able to run 6400 with the CUDIMM with 4 sticks. I don't care if this CUDIMM is rated for 8200. This is the XMP profiles on here are 8200 or 6400. So I will take 6400 CL32 with 4 CUDIMMs any day of the week if I can get it to work, because then finally it took CUDIMM to fix the Intel issues and to allow Intel to finally run 4 sticks at decent speeds and finally catch up to AMD when it comes to like 4 sticks memory compatibility. So we will be looking at CUDIMM on Intel in the future. So I'm waiting for my replacement kit, because right now I only have 2 sticks. I need the other 2 to be able to do the video, essentially. I may make a video with just these 2 to show that you can do 8200 on Arrow Lake using CUDIMM technology, and it works fine. So, but basically, guys, that's it. So, essentially, I've got the 8000 kit, and that works with AMD. And then we have CUDIMM at 8200, and that works with Arrow Lake. So those are the memory platforms that we will be looking at in the future. So, so we are, for those wondering, we are running 4 sticks of RAM. Where is it? This is the AMD. guess put it over here. Put it here. Well, you can literally see it like right next to me, but it's like, where's my arrow? Well, right, oh, right here. Okay, right there, right there, right there. 4 out of 4. 4 sticks. 6,400. 6,400. 4 DIMMs. 96 though. Since I have to put my RAM, some of the RAM has to go in the other computer, that's why. So, anyway. I want to be able to match this with CUDIMM on Arrow Lake. Because I'm tired of running like a gimped Intel, because it's like, hey, you can't do the fast sticks like AMD. So we gotta like basically cheat and use CUDIMM. It's not really cheating because Intel supports CUDIMM. But we basically gotta like get Intel up to speed here because man, it needs all the help it can get, man. Give it the CUDIMMs, give it all that stuff, bleeding edge technology, just do all that good stuff, whatever. So we're also gonna take a look at CUDIMM on AMD. We're just gonna like test the bypass mode on here, see how fast we can run this 8200 kit without the CKD enabled on a Ryzen Zen 5 platform. So stay tuned for that too. 192, watch my video, man. Like, these questions about 192 gigabytes, I'm not going to answer them because people who watch the video already know the answers to that. There's literally a video on the channel that addressed that very, very recently. The CPU is literally right here, this one. Oh, wait, no, not this one. Where? Okay, yeah, I know. The CPU, oh, you're talking about the one on the computer. The one on the computer. Right there. Ryzen 9 9950X. 16-core CPU. 16-core CPU. 9950X. With 4 sticks, 6400. 100% rock solid stable. So reliable. And probably because it has a macho buff memory controller that is derivative from the server world is probably the reason why it's so good. Because I still can't believe that the thing can do, like, guys, do you guys understand? The memory controller on the Ryzen can run 3 gigahertz? Like, think about that for a second. A memory controller on the I/O die can run 3 gigahertz. 3 gigahertz. Three gigahertz, man. When was the last time you ever heard of a 3 gigahertz memory controller? That tells you right there that it's pretty buff. It is really, really muscular, strong in terms of a memory controller. Can Intel do 8 gigahertz? What do you mean 8 gigahertz? Oh, you mean the memory? The memory... Oh, you're talking about, what, this? Yeah, this can do 8,000. Dude, CUDIMM. 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 Of course it can, because it has access to CUDIMM. CUDIMM. Helping Intel out. Help them out. Make them go faster. That's what it's all about. I don't know what you mean by quad time. What are you talking about quad time? I'm confused, man. I don't know what you're talking about. 8 gig. You're talking about 8,000 megatransfers, I hope. I'm not sure. Quad times faster? I don't know what that means. Like, what? I don't understand the question. I have no idea. Like, are we talking about two different things? Because I don't know what's the comment is referring to. Help. What help them? What? CUDIMM. CUDIMM. CUDIMM helps Intel. Help them out. Help them out. It can't lift. The Intel can't lift, man. The thing the memory controller is like half the speed or sometimes like 1/4 the speed. It can't lift. It can't lift. Seriously. Like, dude, it's literally on the screen. It can't lift. Do you see these speeds? Do you see these official speeds? These are DDR5 speeds. These are DDR5 speeds. Oh, and by the way, single rank, 5600 is the maximum supported speed on an actual UDIMM. Now, Arrow Lake is superior in that regard. Arrow Lake can do, it's rated for up to 6400, so it is better than 13th gen. 13th gen is the stupid, man. It is the dumb. It is the dumb. Don't be the dumb. That's all I can say. Like, wow. Dude, very disappointing stuff. You meant 2,000, 3,000 max on AMD. Intel can do 8,000. No, Intel can't do 8,000. I don't understand what you're talking about. You're talking about the memory controller speed. No, the Intel memory controller speed is going to either be at 8,000, the Intel speed is going to be the same as AMD, which is 2,000, or it's going to be 1,000 in Gear 4. I was playing around with Gear 4 today, and yeah, man, you know, Gear 4, if you have to run Gear 4 to get like 8,000 working, I mean, that is like, it defeats the whole purpose of even trying to run DDR5 8000. Because DDR4, like, do you guys understand how the ratios work? We need to get this camera out of the way again. It's in the way. So, okay. I kind of don't want to delete any of this stuff. But, like, okay. AMD Gear 1, AMD Gear 2, Intel Gear 2, Intel Gear 4. So, let's talk about this. DDR5 6000. AMD, the memory controller speed is 3 gigahertz in Gear 1. In Gear 2, it is 1500, or not gigahertz, megahertz. Megahertz. Intel, Gear 2, 1500 megahertz. Gear 4, so what is that, 750, right? 750 megahertz? This is what I mean by it can't lift. Like, look at this. What? But no one does this. Like, realistically, no one actually does that. Like, that's not real. Okay? Like, no one actually... You can run it that way, but no one does. Okay? So now let's do another example. DDR5 8000. Do not use 2,000 megahertz. 2,000 megahertz. 1,000 megahertz. There are the speeds. Those are the speeds for DDR5 8000 on the memory controllers. Meaning this doesn't run. It's too heavy. It can't lift that. It's too hard to lift. So you have to drop it down to Gear 2. Then it works. But see, Gear 2 on AMD and Intel is exactly the same. Intel's default is Gear 2. That's what I'm telling you guys. AMD's default, in my opinion, AMD's default should also be Gear 2. I don't like that AMD does Gear 1 up to 6,000. Because I think it creates a false sense of how the CPU is supposed to be used. At least the memory controller. No, this is not the Infinity fabric. This is the memory controller speed, is what we're referring to. This is the memory controller speed. This is the IMC speed, is what we're referring to. So, all this talk about, because I hear so much misinformation on the internet, which proves to me that people literally either don't know what they're talking about at all, or they have never actually owned both platforms and they've never tested both platforms. Because I'm speaking from experience, because I literally have the 13900K, I have the Zen 4 CPUs, obviously we have Arrow Lake, we've shown it on camera already. We have the Zen 5 CPUs. They're literally here. We have the Core Ultra 9 here. We have the 7. We have the 9. We have the 7 over there. We have a bunch of other stuff. We've got a whole bunch of like random memory right here like this. So I'm speaking with authority because I have actually done all the testing. So I don't need to read like Reddit or overclock, like r/overclock PC or r/PCMR. Like, I don't need to read any of that nonsense because like I actually know the truth. You know, like there's a difference. When you know the truth, when you know how it works, and this goes back to the theme of this live stream at the beginning, when we were talking about the acronyms for DDR5 technology. You know, like the more you know, the more powerful your understanding of how the technology works. You don't need to listen to a bunch of noise on the internet because you fundamentally understand the concept. It's 100% clear to you. Like, you're basically the Jedi Knight. Like, you don't need a random stormtrooper to tell you like how DDR5 works because you know how it works better than they do at that point. You understand what I'm saying? So hopefully this stream was educational in that regard, because, you know, there's a lot of misinformation on the internet about like memory controllers, DDR5, like what voltage to use. You know, like how do you can't, oh, like I hear this one all the time. You can't do 4 sticks of DDR5. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard, because if you can't do 4 sticks of DDR5, why is it that like 95% of all the motherboards have 4 sticks of like 4 slots? Like, why are there 4 slots of DDR5 on the motherboard if you can't, supposedly you can't do 4 sticks of DDR5? You know, like that's the stupidest thing I have heard when it comes to like people giving other people advice on building a PC. So Gear 1 is not twice as snappy as Gear 2. No. That is that's another misconception. I don't know if you read that or if you just like came to that conclusion for some reason, but no, that is not true at all. Gear 1 is not twice as snappy as Gear 2. In fact, I personally don't like Gear 1, so I don't like this, and I don't like this. This is only here because Intel's memory controller is weak. This is here because AMD's memory controller is too strong for its own good, we'll say. Because I personally think AMD probably should have never allowed people to use Gear 1. I think it creates like a misconception of like how to, or what sort of memory speeds to aim for. Now, Gear 1 can give you better, lower latency, better performance overall, but the fact remains that it's actually not that much better than Gear 2. Yes, it's better than Gear 2, but it is not like, oh, it is so much better than Gear 2. That is complete nonsense, and it's a lie. And people who are saying that have no idea what they're talking about. Because I have tested Gear 1, I have tested Gear 2, they're barely any different. I know RK Benchmarker is also in the chat watching the stream. He has also tested Gear 1 and Gear 2 in the past, and he found that the benchmark results are really not that different. Yes, Gear 1 is better, but it is not like it is so much better that it's like, oh, it's an absolute must-have. Like, it's really not that big of a deal, guys. Because at the end of the day, the bottleneck is not the memory controller. The bottleneck is always going to be in a memory subsystem, the bottleneck is always going to be the memory modules themselves. That is the bottleneck, not the CPU, not the memory controller. It is going to be not the traces either. The CAD bus is not the bottleneck. Now, it becomes the bottleneck when you're trying to run very high speeds, but it is not the bottleneck from a performance standpoint. The bottleneck is always going to be the internals of the individual memory modules themselves. So the faster you can refresh these, the faster you can run the memory in general, the better your performance. This has nothing to do with the memory controller. The memory controller is not the bottleneck. That is the reason why Gear 1 is kind of a stupid thing, because that isn't even your primary bottleneck in the memory subsystem. And no one really ever talks about this, but that is actually the truth. That is actually the truth. Ask any engineer that works on memory subsystems, and they will tell you that the bulk of the latency in a memory system is actually the DRAM chips themselves. The time it takes to complete a read or write request operation in RAM is way longer than the time it takes the IMC to tell the memory to do something. So hopefully that clarifies that, because man, there is like so much misinformation when it comes to RAM on the internet, and it's like, okay, some of this stuff needs clarification because there's just like no one talking about this from an educational standpoint, from a fundamental standpoint too. So okay. The question about the memory controller, we already kind of clarified that. The memory controller is always going to run either at equal or half or 1/4 of the memory speed. The memory speed is like this. This is the memory clock speed. We've already drawn it on the chart in Paint. Now, what does it mean to be double data rate? DDR. It's in the name. It means that an operation can be executed or queued up on the rise and the fall of a given memory cycle. On the rise and fall of the memory clock cycle. This is the definition of double data rate. Long ago, when there was only regular RAM with no DDR, when it was like SRAM, you had the commands on, I believe it was on the falling edge, but I could be wrong. It was either the falling edge of the cycle or it was on the rising edge. But it was like every, we'll just say falling cycle. So every falling cycle, a command was executed. But then they figured, hey, we can do twice as much work for the RAM if we were to leverage both edges of the clock pulse. Both the rise and the fall of each cycle. This, in essence, is what it means to be double data rate. Double in the sense that you're utilizing both sides of every clock pulse. This is another thing that no one will ever tell you. The real definition of why DDR is called DDR. But there I have just illustrated why DDR is the way it is. There is a type of scheduling that executions in the middle of the cycle as well. Yes, but that's not what DDR5 does. Hence, it would not be called DDR if it was that way. But yes. But that's basically it. That's why it's DDR. So I think we covered a lot of things on this subject, actually. I don't know. I feel like I probably could have organized it a little bit better. We went over noise and jitter. We went over the CAD bus becoming the bottleneck, even with a CKD. We went over what CKD actually does. Gear ratios. Memory controller is actually not the bottleneck. Trace layers on motherboards to improve signal to noise ratio so you can achieve higher speeds like DDR5-8000, for example. And the definition of DDR itself. So this was the deep dive that I've been wanting to do for memory for a while. Clock timing is different. We're not going to talk about the oscillators on this stream. That's a completely different... that might be a good topic for another live stream. The clock timing. We already covered the CKD, though. Like, CKD was already covered. That's literally what this is. So, this is basically just a glorified repeater. That's all it is. Anyone who understands electronic circuits probably feels like this... They were sitting in a, I don't know, like a university lecture on electronic circuits in a memory subsystem, because that's basically what this was. So, anyway, guys... That covers it. Although this was more framed for like PC desktops specifically. We weren't talking about laptops. We weren't talking about like network equipment and other things that use memory, or cell phones or things like that, or mobile devices and power. But yeah, we may do some of that stuff in a future stream. I don't know. The clock timing thing, external e-clock generators. Those things are going to be more for like the CPU. So if we want to talk about CPU architecture, we can do that in another stream. But I wanted to get this out here because there's a lot of misinformation propagating all over the internet on DDR5. And with the launch of the, you know, like with these new Ryzen CPUs, for instance, the 9950X3D, the 9800X3D, a lot of people are upgrading from their old DDR4 or even DDR3 platforms. And they're going to a DDR5 platform. So they don't really know. There are some things to be aware of with DDR5, typically like the speeds, the gear ratios, the voltages are different. Like it used to be, there was one voltage for DDR4 that you had to worry about. Now there's like VDD, VDDQ, VSOC, VDDIO, and then if you're on Intel, there's VCCSA, VCCIO. So, like, then there's all the other stuff with Arrow Lake, which we're not going to get into, like the DVR and the NGU and all that stuff. So there's like a whole bunch. There's a whole bunch of things to be aware of if you're building a PC, either as a new first-time builder, or if you're upgrading from a very old platform, whether it's DDR4 or an ancient DDR3. Because there's a bunch of people that are upgrading from DDR3. I was surprised. There's a bunch of people out there that are still on like an Intel Haswell or a like Ivy Bridge, man. Like I saw a whole bunch of people with like i7 3770Ks. Like those things are from 2012. You know, like they probably didn't get them in 2012, but man, those are old. Those are old. I haven't seen anybody with like Nehalem though. Like Gen 1 i7, like I haven't seen anybody with those. But Sandy Bridge, Ivy Bridge, Haswell, Broadwell, Broadwell E. I've seen some people, they're upgrading from like X79. I think X99 was DDR4. But there's a couple people that are upgrading from like older platforms now. Not a couple people, a lot of people. Because their computers are like so old, and you know, like they're jumping from like SATA-based SSDs to like Gen 5 NVMe. Like that is an insane jump. Different brands of cooling systems. Okay. Well, I don't know. I think the electronic stuff, like the CPU, we may want to tie off this stuff and the related things first, like the clock generators and things. That might be good, because I think that there's a lot of people that I don't know. I feel like the memory stuff though. I'm just speaking from like observing what I know is wrong on the internet, like in terms of like people saying bad advice to other people. And most of it is with regards to RAM. Like that's the main reason why I've been making all these DDR5 videos, because there's a lot of like misunderstanding, misinformation, just straight up ignorance, if we're being honest about like how it actually works. Like people are recommending like wrong voltages, just straight up like wrong, like not even best practices when it comes to like choosing memory. Like, you know, like someone wants to install like a 16 core CPU with a 32 gigabyte 5090. They should not be running 32 gigs of RAM. You know, like that's bad advice. Telling someone that 32 gigs of system RAM is enough for a 9950 X3D and an RTX 5090 is terrible advice. Like, that is just bad advice. You cannot have your system RAM equal your VRAM. Like, that is like a big no-no. But no one ever tells you those things. You know, like that's horrible advice. You know, like when I saw stuff like that, and then like just straight up the things about like, oh, you should buy CUDIMM for AMD. Like, why would you buy? Like, who should buy? No one should be buying CUDIMM if they're going with a Ryzen CPU. Like, that's a waste of money. Like, bypass mode is not the same as like single PLL or dual PLL. Like, such bad advice, man. Like, bad advice. Like, I've seen so many garbage posts on Reddit about like building a PC advice, like buy CUDIMM for like Ryzen and don't buy Arrow Lake, buy 14th gen because 14th gen is better in gaming. Like, when the guy wants an all-purpose PC, like that's another stupid, that's like bad advice, man. Like, okay, if I was gonna choose between like Intel's 14th gen and Intel's Arrow Lake, I would get Arrow Lake 100%, 150%. Like, if I had to go Intel, I would never buy 14th gen. The stupid, like, degradation problems, the BIOS problems that plagued last year. Now, most of that, granted, is probably already fixed, so that shouldn't, I would imagine, it's not a problem anymore. But the fact that you're buying into a dead socket, the fact that you can't benefit from newer memory technology like CUDIMM, the fact that you can't even use a Gen 5 SSD without dropping your GPU to 8 lanes, you know, like, I mean, no, there's no way, man. I would never recommend Raptor Lake in 2025 to anyone building a PC. That would be such a bad move. The power consumption, like the fact that it's like a mini nuclear reactor, you have to use liquid cooling. You can't, you can use an air cooler, but you're like constantly thermal throttled. So you're not going to kill the CPU, but you're going to like always be maxing out the temperature. So it's like, oh man, no, just terrible advice. Like, no, man, Arrow Lake all the way. Like, in my opinion, there's only 2 platforms to recommend people. Arrow Lake for Intel and Zen 5 X3D. Those are the best platforms right now. Like, Intel's platform, the new Intel platform is way better than the old Intel platform. The new AMD platform is just straight up best in class. Like, this one is the industry leader right now. So it's like, if you can get an AMD, get an AMD. Otherwise, if you have to get an Intel for whatever reason, like whether you can't buy the AMD, it's all sold out, whatever, you're tired of waiting, get Arrow Lake. Do not buy Raptor Lake. And I don't know, maybe get, you know, Zen 5. I don't know. Like, those are the only platforms that are relevant at this point in time. Intel Arrow Lake or Zen 5. That's it. Everything else is dead to me. Like, what are you happy with? I mean, I literally just answered the question. I have literally recommended both already. Just get NAS with M2 if you want more storage at that stage. Oh, wait, is that a different question about some other person asking about that? Man, AM5, though, is, like, so good right now, though. This is my top recommendation. For those who want the best of the best, 9950X3D. 9950X3D is the best. Oh, you want me to pick one? Oh, okay, there you go. There's the answer. The best choice, 9950X3D with an X870E motherboard. This is the best platform. It is the top performer in gaming. It is the top performer in productivity. It beats everything in productivity. It beats everything in gaming. So you want the best of the best? 9950X3D. That is the top recommendation. This is currently my favorite CPU. This is the one that I end up using the most. So that's it. Second recommendation would probably be Intel Core Ultra. And then third would probably be Zen 4 X3D, so like a 7950 X3D or a 7800 X3D, like any of those. And then fourth place would probably be the older AMD CPUs, and then last but not least would be Intel Raptor Lake. Definitely not Alder Lake. A lot of people I see are like, oh, that's the other thing too. People recommending that someone buy a Alder Lake. Why would someone... I guess they're on an extreme budget, because it's like... At least people are not recommending like AM4 in 2025. Like, yeah, because that's even older. So that I would not recommend either. Unless someone's on like some insanely tight budget, then the case can be made to get like a 12th gen Intel. But the people who are recommending 12th gen Intel, I don't think these people realize that the newer Intel platform is vastly superior to the older Intel platform in like so many ways. And recommending someone buy a 12th gen Intel, I hope the person who's making that recommendation realizes that the 12th gen is from 2021 and we are currently in 2025. So they're literally recommending somebody buy what is going to be a 4-year-old platform, or at least a 4-year-old CPU, with the only upgrade path is to go to the 14th gen, which is better, but it's like, okay, why would you recommend someone buy a 12th gen when you could literally just tell them to buy Intel Core Ultra or a lower priced AMD AM5 motherboard and CPU combination, and the person can upgrade to the latest AMD CPU in the future, or they can potentially upgrade to, hopefully, an Intel refresh in the future. So, 4930K is so old. That thing is like a terrible CPU bottleneck at this point. Are the ASRock motherboards having any issues with the 9950 like they were? Okay, that's another question that people seem to always ask at least once every stream. So let me address the ASRock thing, because I keep hearing this question about like ASRock motherboards and all this stuff. Okay, to summarize this, because we answered this on stream last week, and now the question is being asked again. There is no problem with ASRock motherboards and AMD CPUs. Period. Like, all the issues that you are reading about online are anecdotal things. They're either one of two things. One, it means that the person who installed the CPU and it died did it wrong. There was either contamination in the socket, so meaning there was some kind of debris on the pins, and that probably shorted something out, and the CPU died. Like, that's the number one. That has nothing to do with ASRock. Number two, meaning that was user error. That was what I call customer-induced damage, or CID. Customer-induced damage. That is user error. Number two, the other problem that it could be was there was a small number of CPUs that were, we'll call them poor overclockers, which means they were badly binned CPUs that were leaky. Anyone who does overclocking knows what it means when you have a leaky CPU. So there were people with leaky CPUs, and the ASRock motherboard was being too conservative with the voltage that it applied when it was booting up the CPU. It needed to be more aggressive, not less aggressive. It needed to be more aggressive with those CPUs to get them to start up, because they were leaky, which means they needed higher voltage to operate with stability. So that was the other issue, and ASRock already addressed that in a BIOS update. In fact, and we can go to an example here. Let's go to the Nova. Let's go to the BIOS page. All right, let me, oh, we got to clean this up. Okay, right here. On version 3.2, the latest BIOS from February 24th, improve minority proportion of AMD 9000 series CPU boot issue. This is so poorly translated, but this basically means that the CPUs, some of these CPUs, were poor overclockers, they were leaky, and they need more voltage to run stable. So this is what they mean by minority proportion of 9000 series CPU, meaning a small portion of CPUs required higher voltage to boot up. That is what this BIOS does. So this BIOS does not lower the voltage. This BIOS raises the voltage. It is more aggressive on the voltage for these CPUs so they can boot up and be stable. That is what it does. So that was the only actual problem. And let me be clear. This doesn't kill a CPU. If the voltage is not high enough, it doesn't kill the CPU. It just makes it so the CPU is not stable. So you have to raise the voltage to make it stable. So that is the answer on the quote-unquote ASRock motherboard issue. That is literally the root cause of the issue. It has nothing to do with ASRock's motherboards like killing CPUs. That was not happening. The few reported instances of that happening was down to user error. All right, so hopefully that answers that. What is the motherboard recommendation for 9950X 3D X870 platform? To be primary engineering product. It depends on what you want to do. Like you told me the applications, but you didn't tell me like what are you gonna plug into the motherboard. So I can do engineering, productivity, all that stuff. I can do all of that on the cheapest motherboard possible. No problem. But it depends on like what are you gonna plug into the motherboard? How many SSDs are you going to use? How many hard drives or like SATA SSDs are you going to use? How many graphics cards are you going to use? Those are the sort of things that you need to decide on. Like those are the variables that determine what motherboard you get. Not, oh, I want to play games or I want to do engineering CAD apps. Like that doesn't tell me anything. Like I can play games on the cheapest motherboard. I can run CAD apps on the cheapest motherboard. Likewise, I can run games or CAD apps on the most expensive motherboard. And it's going to be literally no different. That's the software apps do not determine what motherboard to get. It is the actual hardware that you're going to connect to the motherboard. That is what determines what motherboard you choose. Does that make sense? Like, are you going to run dual graphics cards, for example? Are you going to run, like, 4 M.2 drives? You know, like, those are the sort of things that you need to determine when choosing a motherboard. Like, do you need 10 gig LAN? Are you going to connect it to a home NAS? You know, like, or a 10 gig switch? You know, like, those are the sort of things. Was there another question earlier? Like, okay, I think at this point, we've addressed that because I had a feeling someone was going to ask because it seems like almost every live stream someone asked that question about ASRock boards. Again, you know, like it's the physical things that interact with the motherboard that determines what motherboard to get, not the software. Yeah. Okay. So hopefully that answers that question. But I think this is a good stopping point We covered all the things that I wanted to discuss when it comes to DDR5, as far as I can think. I'm trying to think, was there anything else? We covered the control word for CUDIMM, the supported platforms. I think that's it. Okay, so that's going to be it for this stream. Hopefully people learned something from this. That was the whole point. It was more of like an educational stream rather than just like talking about random tech news, because we always talk about that stuff. And I think there wasn't really anything worth talking about. I'm trying to think, like there was... oh, there was like a reference. Somebody got access to a Radeon 9070 XT reference GPU. I don't understand why AMD didn't like produce these and sell these, because I think this would have been a nice model to get. Complete with backplate. That's kind of cool. So there was actually an AMD reference card. This might still find its way into like a Dell OEM Alienware or an HP Omen or something, who knows. Or just, they might have a custom shroud, but it might still be the same PCB style. And then the only other thing, Where Winds Meet has a new closed beta test set for May 16th through the 19th on PC and PS5. What's unique about this closed beta test is this one is actually available on PC. Normally, a lot of these games, the CBT is on console only because they don't want people like data mining the game. So, but yeah, that's coming soon, I guess. So look forward to that. The system specs for this game are not super high. I mean, like the high specs, it says you need like 12th gen or Zen 3. So you basically need a Pandemic CPU with a Pandemic GPU and 32 gigs of RAM and 100 gigs of SSD storage space to run on high settings. Although they don't say what resolution this is. So I don't know if this is 1080p or 1440p or 4K or whatever. This game, I believe, is Unreal Engine 5 or Unreal Engine 4. It's probably Unreal Engine 5. A lot of these Chinese developed games are UE5, so it could be UE5. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. So we will be taking a look in terms of like the gaming live stream that we do on the weekend. For those of you that are new, we do the Tech Thursday live streams every Thursday, just like this one at the regular time. And then on the weekend, we typically do one weekend live stream, which is gaming focused, but feel free to tune in to the weekend live stream if you're available. If you want to stop by and ask a technical question, I'm more than happy to answer that, even though it's a gaming centric stream. But yeah, we do that like once, either on a Friday or Saturday. And then in 2 weeks, Claire Obscure Expedition 33 comes out. So I will be live streaming the bulk of that game's story mode, or the campaign. And that is turning out, it's shaping up to be a really good game from what I've seen and what I've heard. So that one could potentially be a contender. If not Game of the Year, it could be a contender for Best RPG of the Year for sure. So we will definitely be checking out Expedition 33 on this channel in like 2 weeks from now. So stay tuned for that. Otherwise, that's going to do it for this live stream. If you're new to the channel, do get subscribed if you like this sort of free-form, open discussion-based content like what we do here, what we talked about DDR5. So we cover everything related to building a PC, whether it's the memory, the CPU, whether it's overclocking, whether it's, you know, how to choose the right monitor, you know, 4K gaming, 1440p, even 1080p, all that stuff, high refresh, OLED, all those technologies. Maybe we'll do a deep dive on like display technology in the future too, like the difference between OLED and mini LED and all those things. So just a couple of things to be aware of. But yeah, that's basically it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. As always, you can tune in every Thursdays for Tech Thursdays. And we also do the weekend live streams on the gaming side. And, well, expect to see videos on CUDIMM and DDR5 in the near future on the channel. So thanks for tuning in, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.